the show the establishment warned you about.
That's right, it's the Dr. Tommy Show. We're glad you're here. This is the first broadcast after Hurricane Ian, and the state of Florida is rebuilding after Ian, and there's a lot of good people down here helping, and thank you for coming down here. All of the professionals, be it with the electric companies or the people who are just volunteering or the people who are professionals coming in to help rebuild. It's been a devastating event that happened, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and prayer to bring back some of these communities, and it may never happen. Fort Myers Beach was completely decimated by this thing, and it shows the awesome power of nature, and it also shows that despite what some people may say, that nature is uncontrollable when it's at its worst. And that's when you have to just be able to rely on the help of others and also rely on your faith to try to make it through. And there's been a lot of people who have lost their lives. I think there's, last time I saw, there was close to or just over 100, mostly in Florida, that had lost their lives in the United States. So this is one of those things that, unfortunately, this is the world that we live in as far as nature and where we live in Florida. It's beautiful most of the time, and sometimes it is deadly. And just like in the wildfires of California and earthquakes in California and different things that happen, it's just something we have to learn to deal with. The people who were evacuated out of Florida, took a trip down to Key West. It was already planned, so we went ahead and went after the hurricane, after we got our power back on Thursday. We had almost no damage at all. We had just some limbs down. We were very fortunate in Tampa, us, meaning Tracy and I. In Tampa in general, there was some people with electricity, but overall, we avoided any major catastrophic flooding events that would have happened if it had come to Florida, because Tampa, downtown Tampa especially, is prone to flooding in general. I mean, with a bad storm, downtown Tampa floods. And with this type of storm surge, it would have been catastrophic probably for downtown Tampa. So how do you get around that? I don't know. I mean, Governor DeSantis said it was a 500-year flood, basically. So hopefully that's the case, and then there's not another one for 500 years. But anyway, it's just something you have to figure out what to do as far as if you're on the coast anywhere and the hurricanes are coming and they tell you to evacuate, you have to evacuate. And even if they don't tell you to evacuate, if you're in a low-lying area, particularly if you're in a low-lying area or coastal, it's best to evacuate. But sometimes you can't even evacuate. There was a time, I think it was Charlie, or one of the hurricanes that were supposed to come to Tampa again, and it didn't, and it went right through where the path of Ian almost went through, almost exactly. And people evacuated from Tampa, and they went to Orlando. So Tampa's on the Gulf Coast or the west coast of Florida, and so the people got up out of their places where they were going to be hit by the hurricane and went into Orlando, which is the middle of the state, going east, and Lakeland, and the hurricane went that way. So there's nothing you can do. Some people that I knew evacuated out of the state, and I guess if you're going to evacuate, that's the most I guess you say foolproof way to evacuate is to just get the hell out of the state. And some of our patients did do that. One of them went to Texas, I know, and some went to Georgia and other places. So anyway, our prayers are with those who are hurting and those who have lost their lives. And there's been, like I said, there's numerous that have lost their lives already. And then there's going to be continual needs. One of the things that one of our patients noted, he's been involved with hurricane relief in the past, and he said that if you're going to go to one of these areas and you're going to go to help out, you have to go with the ability to help out a lot. Because otherwise, if you just go down there and you just want to kind of volunteer and pass out water, it's better just to drop the supplies off and leave, because there's stressed supplies down there in the first place. The water you just dropped off is being utilized. And so if you're just going to drop it off, I mean, if you're just there to kind of be a humanitarian, that's fine, but it's better just to drop the stuff off and leave. if that's all you're going to do. If you're going to go down there and do some, serious work, that's one thing. You're going to go down there and restore power, or you're going to help people, remove debris is a big, huge thing, I'm sure. That's one thing. But if you're just going to go down there to bring supplies, that's fine to bring the supplies, but bring the supplies, take them down there and leave. Because if you're not, you're just another mouth to feed, and you're kind of in the way and using supplies. There was not much gas on the way down. And you can imagine if you're there trying to, we saw some of these power companies trying to restore power, and they were waiting in line like the rest of us trying to get gas and diesel, and there's not much of it around. Anyway, so that's it for hopefully hurricanes for us for the season. That was the first and only hurricane of this hurricane season, and hopefully it's the only one. We went through a long period of time. I think it was 10 years where we didn't have a hurricane, and then we had Maria, I believe it was. And then we had this one. So that was 5 years ago, roughly, I think it was. And then we had this one. So anyway, it's just one of those things. Like I said, you have to do your best, and then try to make it through the best way you can. One thing you shouldn't do, though, is do like Kamala Harris did, and immediately out of the gate start blaming the hurricanes on global warming, and then say the way to get around the hurricanes, the way to recover from the hurricanes is to immediately go hard left and start using hurricanes as a vehicle to espouse your racial politics. That's what she did to this Women's Leadership Forum, it was called. Vice President, this is from Breitbart, spoke at a Democratic National Committee Women's Leadership Forum with actress Priyanka Chopra Jonas, who kicked off the discussion by talking about the devastation caused by hurricanes in Florida and Puerto Rico, and, of course, climate change. Why wouldn't we do that, right?
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions, and impacted by issues that are not of their own making.
Why does it seem like
absolutely
Kamala's always on the verge of crying?
We have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality.
So the resources are based on equity. This is the first thing that she has to say about this thing. This is a hurricane that's devastating, and people were devastated across the board. The hurricane didn't stop and say, how much money do you have, and how much money does your community have, and I'm going to devastate you more than the others. But here Kamala Harris comes out, and she wants to do resources to help people based on equity.
But we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
She's grinning like an idiot while she's saying this.
To be in an equal place, sometimes we have to take into account those disparities.
This is a big thing with the leftists there, the equity thing. Equity is basically saying that there is no, it's not enough to have equality. Equality is where people are treated equally in front of the law, mostly. Treated equally in front of the law, ethically, and that sort of thing. Equity is a different story. Equity is where you say everybody has to be equal. And so her point is if you start off lower and then you start off higher, so let's say you have a wealthy neighborhood and then you have a poor neighborhood, those resources have to be then distributed according to what they started with so that everyone comes out in the end. This is the whole socialist leftist point of view, is that everyone must be equal. Everyone that's under them actually must be equal. They are never going to be equal because they're always going to be the decision makers who are treated with given more things and held in a higher esteem, because that's just the way that they run things, because they're the masterminds. They have to be able to have all of the luxuries of life, and you as the person who is being administered, you have to have whatever they give you,
and do that work.
And they all clap like seals.
But also, I will say, as a former prosecutor, part of this issue also has to be about enforcement and where appropriate, making sure that the bad actors pay a price for what they do that is directly harming communities in terms of their health and well-being. So when we think about...
So what the hell is she talking about here? I don't know.
A policy, then, there are many aspects to it, including something that the president and our administration and I are very excited about, which is the opportunity that moving towards a clean energy environment and industry, what it will do in terms of job creation and building up our economy. It's tremendous.
I don't know what the hell she's talking about. She goes from equity to talking about prosecuting people who did the wrong things and then talking about climate change. I guess, and I'm not going to listen to it any further, but I guess that what she's talking about is punishing companies that are using fossil fuels. That's the only thing I think of. I don't know what she's saying. Well, here's the alternative take on it. If you're from Arcadia, this is the way you might look at things. And this is not safe for work, or nor is it safe for children. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hide the children. Turn down your volume.
That shit about DeSantis, but that gas is here in Arcadia. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but it's here in Arcadia. So y'all know who we vote for. I don't know about the rest of you motherfuckers, but I'm voting for DeSantis. And I'm a Democrat. So y'all can call it what the fuck y'all want.
We got children out here.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
He's sorry. So that's a Democrat guy in Florida, in Arcadia, which is a rural part of Florida, talking about what he's going to do. Or the reason he's voting for DeSantis after the flood. I'm sorry, after the hurricane and the flood from Ian. So anyways, 2 points of view. So anyway, Arcadia is not a rich place. And then Arcadia is actually very rural. And like I said, this guy's a Democrat and he sees what's going on. Let's see what else we got here. Quiet that. So that's hurricanes from 2 different points of view. One of them is from the racial equity point of view of Kamala Harris and the, I guess, economic equity point of view, and the other one's from the real life on the ground point of view of a Democrat voter.
That shit about DeSantis, but that gas is here in Arcadia. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but it's here in Arcadia. So y'all know who we vote for. I don't know about the rest of you motherfuckers, but I'm voting for DeSantis. And I'm a Democrat. So y'all can call it what the fuck y'all want.
We got children
We
out
got
here.
children.
I'm sorry, man.
She's sorry. Anyway, so that's pretty cool. I'm glad that there's people out there that actually can see through the bullshit of people like Kamala Harris. Speaking of bullshit, here's something from United Nations. This is from Breitbart. I mean, United Nations partners with Google to silence climate skeptics. A United Nations representative revealed a globalist organization has partnered with Google to prioritize messages underscoring the gravity of climate change. Melissa Fleming, the UN's Undersecretary for Global Communication, said in a September 29th World Economic Forum event at the UN the UN is working to elevate the content of climate change. You know, we've partnered with Google, for example. If you Google climate change, you will at the top of your search get all kinds of UN resources, Ms. Fleming declared. We started this partnership when we were shocked to see that when we Googled climate change, we're getting incredibly distorted information right at the top. You know, so but basically that when they Googled climate change, they were shocked when they saw that people were saying, is climate change real? Do we really have to reorganize our whole lives around what people will say is climate change? Do we really have to give up our ownership of vehicles in the name of climate change? Do we really have to stop eating meat because of climate change? And she saw this at the top of Google and it alarmed her. As social media platforms become more dominant, she said, there was a, quote, proliferation of misinformation and disinformation that was achieving what we were trying to achieve, a better world, a more inclusive, a more peaceful, a more harmonious world. It was making it more difficult. So in their minds, so a better world, a more inclusive, more peaceful. Basically what they say is, you agree with us and then you can be harmonious. You agree with us and you can be more inclusive and you're more peaceful. If you disagree with us and if you dare to post something on the internet or try to have an alternative point of view of what we did, you're making things difficult and you're not making things a better world. She said that social media users are looking for a more curated environment where they can avoid being exposed to the wrong messages. So this is a very paternalistic point of view, apparently, this lady has. She says, I think there's certain people who have totally got lost down rabbit holes. And they're going to hopefully find their way out at some point. This is people like me, I guess. But I do think there are all kinds of people in the middle, she said. And there is evidence that all people are feeling overwhelmed. They're feeling so much gloom and doom from the news environment as well, even the responsible news environment. So I think there's a hunger to be a part of something that's not conspiratorial, that it's not hateful, it's not divisive, that's working towards making the world a better place. There's a lot of positivity to be had. this is the quiet voice of a tyrant right there. That's the person who says on one side of her mouth, do all these things, and talks about being peaceful and all that, and not hateful. If you dare disagree, though, watch out, because you are going to be thrown under the jail for her. And it starts with stopping you from being seen on Google, is basically what she's saying here. The first thing is to stop you and people like you from being seen on Google, because Google was what basically the only way to get information. The internet / Google, which Google runs the internet, is the only way to get information now. And so if they can control that, if they can just harness the information and restrict what you're able to see, then maybe you will be more peaceful. Maybe you will be a little bit less hateful. Maybe you'll be less divisive, and you'll just follow exactly what they say. And today it's climate change, and tomorrow it may be racial equity and health equity and other things. At some point, though, it may be something that you don't agree with if it's already there. If it's not already there, that you don't agree with what they're talking about. So just be on the lookout for people like this. But this is the United Nations for you. United Nations is funded by us, essentially. Other countries pitch in, but the United Nations is funded by the United States. And we really should basically defund the UN. I don't know of a whole lot of good that comes out of the UN. The UN gave us the WHO. The WHO gave us COVID disinformation from the get-go about what the COVID virus was, and said it wasn't passing from person to person. Then they said China's on top of it, and there's nothing going on. We believe China. And then later on they come out and say, well, all these other things, well, it looks like this is a really bad thing. And then also they're behind stomping out any alternatives to whatever the mainstream pharmaceutical companies have developed as far as fighting COVID and investigating anything that may be already there, such as ivermectin or Plaquenil. They were in charge of stomping out that, like she says, disinformation and misinformation. So I tell you, it's an everyday thing with these people. You have to always be on your guard, and you can't just let down your guard. And this is one of the things that they do. I had another patient the other day said, anytime something big happens in the news, he's always on the lookout for what it's covering up, because in his mind, something big is dropped in the news. They're sliding something else out there, and they don't want you to see it, so they're trying to just basically hide. And so this is that was he was saying, and you have to always be suspicious of these people. OPEC. Joe Biden went over to Saudi Arabia. What was it, July? And he fist bumped the crown prince there, and he fist bumped him because he was afraid of getting COVID. He actually got COVID, appears to be got COVID on the trip, because then that's when he came home and got COVID diagnosed. Anyway, this is from MSN.com. And if you're ever looking for garbage news articles that you just want to, I don't know, just blatant, like biased, left-wing biased articles that are completely slanted, go to MSN.com and they'll have them. Not that this one is necessarily, but if you want to look for that, if you want to look for, sometimes I look for articles and I think I want an article to kind of illustrate something that's biased. And if somebody else didn't cover it, then I can go to the direct source and get it. So if I wanted something from the Washington Post or from New York Times or whatever, I go to MSN.com. Actually, the problem though with going to those Washington Post or New York Times is all those veritable sources, all these great historic media sources like New York Times and Washington Post, they're always paywalled. They want you to pay to see their content, and I don't give a damn to pay for New York Times or Washington Post. So anyway, it's funny that well, this is from MSN. Biden searching for alternatives to help lower gas after OPEC cuts oil production. President Biden said Thursday his administration looking for ways to lower gas prices after oil exporting countries announced plans to cut production by 2 million barrels a day, a move that will likely raise prices at the pump. You think? It says here, this is Brian Deese, who heads the White House National Economic Council, said Wednesday the Biden administration is calling on the U.S. energy companies to keep bringing pump prices down by closing the gap between wholesale and retail prices so that American consumers can pay less at the pump. So is that how you stay in business? Is that how you stay in business when you're paying record inflation for everything? When you're paying record inflation for for rent. You're paying record inflation for food. You're paying record inflation prices for record inflated prices for energy. You're paying inflated prices for wages now because they've passed so many minimum wage hikes. And this is the way you do it, is you close the gap between wholesale and retail prices. So Brian Deese clearly doesn't understand what it is to take to make a company work. And that thing that he's talking about, that gap between wholesale and retail prices, that's actually how you make money, Brian. And that's how you stay in business. This is what happens when you have people in government who have never worked in the real world and are only theoreticians or academic people, and that they've never really worked outside of government. This is how they see things. So instead of drilling or removing regulations that are holding people back from being able to produce energy here domestically, he says you need to basically not make money. And I guess their next step is to they're going to tap into the Strategic Oil Reserve. And that is let's see here. This other article I got. This is from Fox Business. U.S. emergency oil supply shrinks to 40-year low as Biden keeps tapping reserve. President Biden said Thursday he had a reaction of, quote, disappointment after OPEC Plus decided to cut oil production. Biden said the U.S. is looking at, quote, alternatives and that we haven't made up our mind yet. I know what he hasn't made up his mind about is actually using the stuff that's under the ground right now, the dead dinosaurs and plants and things that we have underneath us right now. All this talk about energy, when we had to go down to, when we went down to the Key West, we had to stop and get gas, and gas was not easy to find after Fort Myers. And we ended up getting gas, and we had to wait, 45 minutes or so to get it, or an hour. Anyway, I was thinking, what in the hell's going to happen if these brain surgeons that run the government get their way and they eliminate gas-powered vehicles and they eliminate all these fossil fuels and everything? What's going to happen if something like this happens? Electricity being out's bad, right? Well, it's really bad if electricity is out and generators are out. Or it's real bad if electricities are out and you can't bring a truck in to fix your electricity. Has anybody ever thought about that? Do you ever think about how stupid that sounds? That you're going to eliminate fossil fuels and you're going to eliminate gas-powered vehicles like they're trying to do in California. They're saying they're going to do in California by 2035. You ever stop and think about how stupid that really sounds? If you've ever been in a situation where you have no electricity, it really sucks. It sucks because you can't run your air conditioner. If you are in a place where there's no city water, if you're on a well like we are, you can't run your water. You can't take a shower. You can't heat your water even if you are in a situation where you have city water, unless you have a gas heater. But then again, that's gas. See, that's my point. Fossil fuels, gas, hydrocarbons. If you were to understand at all how energy works, if you've ever taking a course in energy, you would understand that the carbon bonds and hydrocarbons are miraculous. They hold so much energy compared to anything else, except for nuclear. And that's why they're so ingenious, that they were put here on Earth by God or Allah or the great evolutionary beings who evolved from one cell into a dinosaur, then died, and then they knew later on that they were going to become gas for us. Whatever the case is, fossil fuels are a miracle. Fossil fuels have lifted more people out of poverty and lifted more people out of health despair than anything in the history of our world. If you look at fossil fuels now, if it wasn't for fossil fuels, a lot of the countries that are developing now would be in utter catastrophes as far as health are concerned. It's only because of fossil fuels that they're able to do some of the things that they're able to do in these developing countries. And now we have developed so far, we've come so far that we're now so smart that we have educated ourselves so greatly that now we say hockey stick graphs prove that man is causing the earth, which they say has been here for billions and billions of years. Man, with his cars and with his energy and with his cows farting and eating meat, all of these things, man is going to be the one to destroy the earth. not the asteroid that took out the dinosaurs, not whatever happened that caused the Ice Age, not whatever happened that caused the Ice Age to go away. No, man with his cars and his dirty CO2, which plants love to eat, which plants require to eat, is going to be the one to take away everything for us. And it just gets to the point where you think this is sheer idiocy if you start thinking about it in that term. But they don't. That's the thing is, you're not supposed to think about it. You're supposed to feel about it. Thinking about it and feeling about it are the two alternatives that you have in political discourse nowadays. If you are conservative or libertarian, you're more likely to think about it. If you are a liberal or a leftist, you're more likely to feel about it. Actually, I take that back. I think if you're a liberal, you're more likely to feel about it. I think leftists really do think about it. They think about it, and then they use liberals who are operating on good feelings to do their bidding, basically. I think there's a lot of leftists out there who know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly, and these are the globalists. These are the people who are the masterminds in charge of trying to reorder society on the basis of the Great Reset and all these things. Those are the guys, they're really thinking, guys and gals, don't want to leave them out. So those are the guys and gals who are really thinking, these leftists who run these big think tanks, there's a World Economic Forum and all these things. They have thought it out in the long term, and they know in the long term that if they were able to make people live in cities, if they were to make it less affordable to have things like a gas-powered car and fossil fuels, and then people will say, well, we're going to have to use public transportation now because there's no gas cars anymore, and we're going to have to live in cities so we can drive our little electric car to and from. We won't run out of electricity on the way. So those people actually have thought about things. But anyway, back to the point is, leftists are the ones who are operating or telling people to operate based on emotion, whereas if you're on the right or conservative, you're more likely to operate on the basis of thinking about it. And if you think about it, climate change doesn't make sense, and it surely doesn't make sense what they're trying to do to stop climate change. Because if they're really trying to stop climate change, the one that they would be after the most is China, but they're not. All these accords and everything that we're supposed to join in, they don't affect China. They don't affect China now because China is considered a developing community. And so in California, they're going to outlaw gas-powered cars apparently by 2035 or so they say. And then if you look at a lot of these accords, the things that we're supposed to enact now in the United States to restrict our ability to do things like heat our homes, drive cars and things like that, pay more for energy, we're supposed to start that now. In China, they don't start that until 2050 because they're developing, you see. And so in my math, if 2035 is when we have to stop driving gas cars because it's so important that we do that to stop climate change, what's going to happen when China keeps doing it for another 15 years after that because they don't have to start till 2050? And who's to say China is going to start anyway? I mean, it's really a fool's errand. And I think what it is basically it's a big scam. I don't think climate change is anything other than a scam that's used by people to rile people up emotionally, to cause popular support for things that people are investing in now where they can become rich later. So let's say that you are a climate change person, a bigwig. You enact policies now that says you have to start making these investments in these industries now. So you do that by laws, right? And to get those laws popular supported, you go out and tell everybody who will listen, look, these hurricanes are caused by climate change. Never until the climate change catastrophe of humans and the Industrial Revolution, never until then have we had hurricanes like this. Never. And people obviously weren't alive before the Industrial Revolution, so they just listen and they assume that they're right. And then they look past the dinosaurs and they look past the Ice Age and they look past the loss of the Ice Age and all this other stuff. And they say, you know what? They're right. It's too dangerous. We have to enact these policies. So then you drive popular support for your laws and your regulations. And then the people who are the operators, the bigwigs again, they're in the background investing in all these different industries. So they're getting rich like Al Gore. You know, Al Gore's the big climate change guy, and he's invested in all the climate change stuff. Then he goes out there and whips people into a frenzy about climate change, and guess what? He gets rich. That's just a microcosm of how it works. And that's what I think's going on. And people like Gavin Newsom and all these other clowns, they're enacting these things where they're going to, like I said, outlaw gasoline engines by 2035. That's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. Even if they wanted it to happen, it couldn't happen because they couldn't get stuff done. Just like I said, could you imagine there's a wildfire in California and you're sitting there trying to charge your electric truck or your electric helicopter so you can go deliver aid or put out a fire? It's not going to happen. But what's going to happen in the meantime is they're going to drive all these people to support these things that are make these companies rich. You know, BlackRock is this big investment firm, private equity firm. And I believe as the state of Louisiana just pulled out $800 million out of BlackRock, saying we're not going to support you financially by investing with you because of your adversity to climate, or your adverse stance on fossil fuels. You know, BlackRock's big on ESG, environmental social governance, which basically means left-wing stuff. And if you aren't following ESG / left-wing talking points or left-wing advocacy points, then the BlackRock's going to punish you by not investing in you or by not allowing you to access to capital. And that's a big thing. And ESG is a whole other big, huge topic. But ESG basically is the financial piece of environmentalism. It's the financial piece of how you force companies to do what you want. So ESG allows corporations to show that they are thinking right, and by thinking right, accessing capital, because these corporations, these banks and things like this aren't allowing you to get access to capital if you don't have a great ESG score. It's really it takes a lot to unpeel that onion, but if you think about it, there are a lot of the stuff that's going on now. It starts off with a hurricane and a response to a hurricane, but it unpeels so much more than what they're after, and they're so dishonest they'll never come out and tell you. So you have to go out there and find it yourself. This is from the westernjournal.com. First poll released since Hurricane Ian shows DeSantis with double-digit lead as ballots start going out. So they're starting to send the ballots out. There's still more than a month to go before Election Day, but in Florida, it looks like the governor's race is Governor Ron DeSantis is to lose, according to the most recent polling in the state. Charlie Crist is who's running against DeSantis. It says Charlie Crist is currently behind DeSantis by 11 points, according to the poll. This is a Mason-Dixon poll, which puts him well outside the margin of error of 3.5%. That's not a lock. Nothing is really, but it's about as close to one as we're likely to see this year. That's right. Thank goodness. It basically said in here that DeSantis is also outspending Crist 10-1 on ads, a feat made possible in part by the fact that he has reportedly 27 times more cash on hand to play with than Crist, which is interesting because usually what happens with these, not necessarily DeSantis, but anytime you have a Republican running in a competitive race against a Democrat, the Democrats usually have so much more money on hand because the Democrats really are the party of the rich, despite what they say. The Democrats are the party of the elites, let's put it that way. Not necessarily rich people, but the elites. The people who are rich but also use their money to try to gain their economic and political advantage in a left-wing way. And there's a lot of them out there. Like I said, the ESG corporations and all that, people who are involved with ESG, and their corporations are too. Those are all Democrat people. Those are all, and usually the Democrat gets funded by these companies through PACs and things of that nature. But apparently they see Charlie Crist as a lost cause. And I thought it was interesting when they did have Charlie Crist run again as governor, because the guy is run now for governor. This will be his second run at governor since he's been an ex-governor, because he was governor once for 4 years here in Florida as a Republican. And then he lost the Senate race as an independent because he got primaried by Marco Rubio back in 2010. And then he tried to run for governor again against Rick Scott, and Rick Scott beat him. And so now here he is again, trying to get water from a rock or turnip, and trying to beat blood from a turnip, and trying to beat DeSantis, because it ain't going to happen. DeSantis is much more popular than Charlie Crist ever was as a governor. And so it's not going to happen. This is from conservativebrief.com. Record number of New Yorkers re-registering driver's licenses in Florida. The state of Florida under Governor Ron DeSantis and a Republican legislative majority continues to be a beacon for Americans tired of living in heavily regulated blue states. Just the News reports. The analysis comes at a time when New York Governor Kathy Hochul has urged New York Republicans to leave, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has welcomed new residents to the free state of Florida. In August, 5,838 New Yorkers switched their driver's license to Florida, the highest recorded number for a single month in history. That's pretty amazing. And this is what Kathy Hochul says. And we're here to say that the era of Trump and Zeldin and Molinaro, just jump on a bus and head down to Florida where you belong, okay? Ah! People cheered. Hochul said last month at a campaign event for newly elected Representative Pat Ryan. Get out of town! Get out of town because you don't represent our values, Hochul said, impersonating Hillary Clinton. You're not New Yorkers. So she's telling these people that voted for Zeldin or going to vote for Zeldin and Molinaro and this other person, Trump, that you're not New Yorkers, get out of town. And they are. They actually are. They're leaving in droves. And we've seen some of them here, actually. We have one of our patients here said that he lived in New York, and then he lived in New York, and he moved out of New York. And then right before COVID, he went back to New York. And he said that he'll never go back to New York as long as it's in the way it is now. He said it's unrecognizable. There's a lot of people that are fleeing New York. And some other people are fleeing New York, and Kathy Hochul doesn't want them there. And this is from the Daily Caller. New York Governor Kathy Hochul calls for a, quote, federal solution to border crisis now that illegal migrants are flooding her backyard. Democratic New York Governor Kathy Hochul said the Biden administration needs to create a, quote, federal solution to the immigration crisis as thousands of migrants flood the state. During a Tuesday interview with Bloomberg Television's David Weston, Hochul said she had previously, quote, raised this with the White House as the Big Apple continues to be flooded with migrants from the southern border. And then Mayor Adams, who's also a sanctuary state proponent, said, the far right is doing the wrong thing. The far left is doing nothing. I mean, the silence. I don't believe the silence that I'm hearing, Adams said. These people are in need of services, and I'm not hearing from the two ends of the spectrum. Far right is doing what's wrong. Far left is doing nothing at all. What's the far right doing that's wrong? And far right means, I guess, anybody who's basically right of, or Mitt Romney probably qualifies as far right in his mind. Anyway, Republicans are doing what's wrong. Democrats are doing nothing at all. That's what it basically meant. It's time for us to address this in a unified way, and that's what we're doing. This administration is doing. We should not be doing it alone. From what I read, I saw another article that said they shipped these migrants to some type of island. It wasn't Martha's Vineyard, but they shipped them to an island in New York. I'm not sure what island, but that's what I read in another article. I don't have it with me. The city has received more than 11,000 illegal migrants since May, overwhelming the city's shelter system. Adams said mid-September that the city was, quote, nearing its breaking point. Every time I read this stuff, it says they're called illegal migrants and they're shipping them to cities and putting them in shelters. I just think about, they're coming to America, right? America's, if you listen to the left or any Democrat, presidential election season, they portray America as this hellhole. Usually in election seasons, they always think about it this way. They portray it this way, but especially in election season, especially for president, Democrats say America is a hellhole. America is racist. America is misogynist. America is against poor people. America is founded on racism. America has racist statues. And then you see all these people just flooding to try to get here. It just doesn't ever make sense to me. And I always wonder, why aren't they going to China? Why aren't they going to Russia? Why aren't they going to some of these glorious socialist places, these socialist paradises? I suppose they are flooding other socialist paradises in Europe and Sweden, things of that nature. But I always wonder, what would happen to these migrants if they just showed up in China? What would China do with 11,000 illegal migrants? It's just funny to think about. It's not funny actually for the people, though. These poor people are being used. They're told to come here by these mayors, these governors, these presidents, and said, come, we're a sanctuary city, we're a sanctuary state, we're a sanctuary country, the borders are open. And then they come here, and then they're treated like pariahs. I mean, New York wants them. New York is a sanctuary state. New York City is a sanctuary city. Washington, D.C. is a sanctuary city. Chicago is a sanctuary city. I suppose San Francisco is too. And Massachusetts is a sanctuary state, I believe. And that's why Governor DeSantis sent the illegal migrants to Martha's Vineyard. And what do they do as soon as they get here? So they say, come here, we want you. We're big-hearted liberals. We're big-hearted, compassionate. We want you here. We're not like the racists that founded this country. We're not like the racist statues you see. We love you. We love diversity. We love inclusion. We want you to come here and think the way you want to think, just as long as you don't think differently than we do. And then if you try to think that differently, then we'll get with Google to censor that so you can't even see it. But anyway, come here. And then they come here, and then what do? They complain about them nonstop. Why are they here? Why are they here? What can we do with them? We're a sanctuary city. We told them to come here. Now they're here. Now help us out. Give us some money. I mean, does New York not have enough money to take care of these people? And if they don't, then why the hell did these politicians tell the people to come there? That's the height of hypocrisy, and that's the height of that's the height of hypocrisy, and that's the height of mismanagement. When you're telling people to come to your state and you know you don't have the ability to take care of them. You know what that also is, though? What it truly is virtue signaling. Because Kathy Hochul knows damn well, and Mayor Adams knows damn well, that in order to get to New York, if you're an illegal, you're going to have to come through the border states. And unless you're coming by ferry boat to Ellis Island or thereabouts, you're not going to get to New York unless you go through a border state. So they can virtue signal, and they can say, come to the sanctuary state of New York, come to the sanctuary city of New York City, come to Washington, D.C. if you're Mayor Bowser, come to Chicago if you're Mayor Lightfoot. But they know they're going to have to pass through border states first to get there. And so they can virtue signal on one hand and act all, they can show how big-hearted they are, and on the other hand, they can know, well, these people are probably never going to end up here anyway. And if they do end up here, we're going to put them in the inner city slums, and they're really not going to have a very good life anyway. But that's what we do. They virtue signal about that, just like they virtue signal about everything else that, climate change. Leonardo DiCaprio virtue signals about how he cares so much about the climate as he jet sets across the country, and every other big shot climate change activist does with their private jets, going to fancy places in Europe to talk about how they care so much about the country or the world and flying in their jets. We have a new president at UF. This is President Ben Sasse is going to be the president of UF, University of Florida in Gainesville. Little Ben Sasse, as some of you may know, is currently a senator in Nebraska, a junior senator, was elected there in 2014. So he's 8 years in. He's elected to a second term, and he's one of the 7 Republican senators to vote to convict Donald Trump of inciting an insurrection in a second impeachment trial. So little Ben Sasse is now going to be the president at UF. And his career includes, before his stop at the Senate, he was a president of a college in Texas. What is it called here? Midland Lutheran College, now Midland University. 37, youngest elected chief executive in American higher education when he took over leadership of a 128-year-old institution in spring of 2010. So there we go. So now the guy who's going to run UF in this college, I think I read here it has, during his enrollment, his term, listen to this college that he was in charge of. Sass was installed as president of Midland Lutheran College, now Midland University, on December 10, 2010. 12/10/2010. When he was appointed, enrollment was at a historic low and the college was, quote, on the verge of bankruptcy. During his tenure as president, you ready for this? Enrollment grew from 590 to 1,300 students. So, congratulations, President Sass. I hope you don't screw it up, because I can tell you for sure, UF's a different animal than Midland University, and it's kind of an interesting pick that they picked this guy. I don't know. Ben Sass, little Ben Sass. He's the current president, or I guess future president of the Florida Gators. Anyway, thank you for all joining us, and I hope you all are safe if you're listening. And please, if you can help out with the people in Florida, it would be wonderful. And like I said, help out a lot. Or if you can just send donations, and that would be great too. So we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.